Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Fujitsu Impact series, Driving AI for Real Business Outcomes. In episode 1, we explored moving from AI hype to measurable outcomes. Today, we tackle a critical question. Would you trust AI for business critical decisions? So, trust isn't just a buzzword, it's a foundation for adoption in regulated industries like healthcare and manufacturing. But what does trustworthy AI really mean? And how do we make it happen? So we're thrilled to welcome back our experts from episode 1 to keep this conversation going. So first we have John Walsh, CTO at Fujitsu Europe, Aditya Raj, Global Fujitsu Distinguished Engineer and SME for Data and AI, and Dr. Chris Marshall, Vice President at IDC Asia Pacific, leading AI, data analytics, and industry research. So thank you all for being here. Let's begin. Before we dive into the challenges and solutions, let's start with the basics. So, Chris, from your perspective, what does trustworthy AI really mean, and why is it more than just a buzzword?
Well, there's many definitions, I suppose, of what it means to trust AI, but the way IDC looks at it, and I think wisely, is that trustworthy AI means artificial intelligence that's been designed and deployed in ways that make it worthy of trust by human users. And this is partly about the outputs of the AI tool. For example, it means that the outputs have got to be reliable and reasonably accurate and unbiased and credible and secure and safe and fair, all these good things. The outputs have to be good. But also, and this is the thing that often gets neglected, it means the process of generating those outputs needs to be reasonably explainable and even transparent, as much as possible at least. Now, we generally don't trust black boxes, even if those black boxes generally produce very accurate answers. And you see this, for example, in traditional predictive AI, where you get very reliable models, but frankly, people don't trust them so much because they have no idea how they work. And this is especially important that people trust these outputs and the way they're generated when people's lives and businesses are on the line. And just like when we trust another human being, we have to have confidence in the outputs, but we also have to have confidence in the motivations and the intentions that lie behind producing those outputs. It's kind of funny, I think, the more you learn about what Gen AI technology is, the less you really instinctively want to trust it. Because arguably, Gen AI is not really reasoning the way human beings do it. It's really just manipulating textual objects according to sort of statistical patterns.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I definitely understand you. So great insights, Chris. So trust isn't just about outputs, it's about the process behind them. So John, from an enterprise lens, how do you define trustworthiness in AI?
So I think Chris used a really important word there, which was confidence. Yeah. And it's about being confident that the information that you're being given or the data that you're being given from the AI will facilitate making good business decisions. Now, he is correct. A good part of that is being able to explain how you arrived at the output data. Yeah. What is the provenance of the input data? What patterns did you follow? Is it possible to understand in some way why the AI, can it quote from the source of the information, etc. So there's a whole bunch of techniques, and Aditya will allude to some of these techniques in a little while, in terms of what we do at Fujitsu in determining the outcome is accurate, precise, and we have a very high level of confidence in it so that we can make decisions. I guess when I was a younger engineer, I spent a lot of my time working in tensor mathematics, and I had calls to work. It was a privilege, and it's only coming to pass now, but I worked in oncology and cancers. Now, I was a trained mathematician, computer scientist, and what I was doing was representing data from the field of oncology, genetics, diagnostics in mathematical terms, in tensors. And we've built systems. Subsequently, we have built systems, and those systems are really only going live now. And obviously, when you're making life and death decisions, you want to be clear about how you arrived at the outcome data. Very, very clear. So as the level of risk, as the level of involvement with the human increases, then the level of confidence also has to increase. And so when I talk about trustworthiness in the context of the enterprise, or in medicine, or in anything, it's about achieving that level of confidence. Now, we can achieve a very, very high level of confidence using some very specific techniques around explainability, around knowledge graph RAG, around anomaly detection, etc. Would I replace an oncologist having spent 20, 25 years of their lives in the field of cancer with an AI today? The answer is no. Would I want my oncologist to have access to an AI tool to reinforce what he already knows, or help in drug selection, or help in diagnostics, or help in forecasting the outcome for the patient? Absolutely. I'd want my oncologist to have access to that tool. That's the best answer.
Well, thank you, John. Well, now that we know what trustworthiness means, let's talk about why it's critical. Chris, IDC research shows trust is one of the biggest barriers to AI adoption. Why does this matter so much for businesses today?
Well, I suppose there's several reasons, really. I mean, obviously, compliance and governance are especially non-negotiable in regulated industries. It's not enough to do the right thing. You've got to be seen to be doing the right thing, and you've got to be able to report on that. But I think it's even more important than that, because, I mean, it's even at the personal level, right? Whenever we have a new AI tool, if I'm not willing to trust it, I'm probably not going to be very likely to use that tool any further. And that very hesitancy that I might have because I don't think it's going to be worth my trouble to invest in that particular tool, or I don't think I'm going to get useful results from it, stops that tool going into production and therefore delivering real business value. So I think there's a natural barrier to making, or a trust barrier to making POCs get into production. Also, I think a lack of trust inevitably suggests a bit of a degree of risk, right? Leaders worry that if AI is untrusted, or untrusted AI, it can cause compliance issues or security incidents that we don't know about, precisely because I don't trust it. It might cause newspaper headlines or regulatory penalties. The risk in many cases of getting it wrong, just going back to John's oncology example, the risk of getting it wrong can often be a lot higher than the perceived upside of using the technology, especially. And that means that low trust really does discourage adoption. Your oncologist, if he's nervous of false positives, for example, he might not be willing to use the tool or take the outputs of the tool terribly seriously. I mean, one thing you see again and again in this business is that trust is very hard to earn. It takes time, but it's very easy to lose. And any failures of trust can be very, very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, that's a very interesting point about compliance and risk, Chris. John, what does it look like on the ground? When trust is missing, what's the real impact?
So I think, the point that Chris is making there about validation, about rechecking. So if you ultimately trust something, you take everything at face value, right? And this is, pretty straightforward in deterministic systems. You have your inputs, you have your process, and you have your outputs, and pretty much they look the same every single time. And it's also true of classic AI, what we're referring nowadays to as classic AI, expert systems, etc. Effectively in the new world, you have adaptable systems which change over time, systems which learn over time. Massively powerful. But if you do not trust what's going on, or you have a doubt about what's going on, then you're going to spend quite a lot of time checking. All right, you're going to spend quite a lot of time checking the outputs, etc. Now, on the ground, therefore, the tooling needs to be built in such a way that you can automate that checking. And Aditya will go through it in a little while, give you some insight. But what does it mean? Well, it means things like using knowledge graph RAG, to get some contextual grounding. Provenance tracking for the data, things like hallucination checking and fact checking, getting your explainability, and we have dashboards for doing that, etc., in terms of the hypothesis and the reasoning, your ability to audit, to calibrate, to detect drift in the model, etc. However, given all of the above mathematical functions and all the rest of it, you know what? There's no single silver bullet. All right. So it's a combination of using the mathematical techniques and notwithstanding human in the loop. You know, the more critical a system becomes, the more it's important to have some expertise in terms of checking the outcome, etc. Yeah. So that's what it actually looks like on the ground, irrespective of how complex a system or how risky a system you're in fact actually developing. There's always the need for that checking, plus a whole bunch of functional things that we can do to validate the outcome. Okay?
Yep. Thank you, John. All right. So we've covered the what and we've covered the why, but how do we make it happen? Let's make it a little more practical now. Aditya, how do we actually embed trustworthiness into AI systems from day one?
Thanks, Carlos. Great question and great discussion so far. I love this topic of trust and trustable AI or trustworthiness AI, whatever you want to call it. So by now, you know that trust isn't a single feature. It's a design choice across the life cycle. At Fujitsu, we operationalize this with a trust by design stack that bakes in governance, explainability, provenance, and robustness into day one decisions and day two operations. Let's talk about governance from day one. What do? We start with Kojuchi AI Trust, which is risk classification, ethics impact, fairness checks, and evidence capture aligned to EU AI Act, delivered practically with partners like ACOS Hub. If you can bring up the slide from ACOS, Carlos. So Fujitsu has provided a startup with AI trust technologies consisting of 5 core tools from its Fujitsu Kojuchi AI services. And these technologies will enable ACOS AI governance platform, ACOS Hub, to offer EU AI Act compliance, risk management, and general AI governance services and solutions enterprise customers. Why it matters? It turns trust into controls and artifacts, a risk profile, required mitigations, and auditable compliance report before a model even touches production. Next, let me talk about explainability that people can use. So what do we do in this explainability part is basically we have two explainable XAI, what we call it, explainable engines for different problem scenarios. So first one is wide learning explainable AI, that enumerates meaningful feature combinations. Great when your data is sparse or tabular. Then you have deep tensor and knowledge graph technology that adds graph-based rationale and citations. So you can inspect the chain of reasoning. Then let me talk about grounding generative AI into enterprise with the enterprise truth. What do we do in this part is basically knowledge graph extended retrieval augmented generation. So this is to suppress hallucination and attach citations and provenance to every answer in a secure environment. Why this is important? Stakeholders, they trust answers they can verify, and regulators can trust answers they can audit. Then let me talk about robustness and security in production. So here we continuously check calibration, drifts, vulnerabilities. So we publish transparency through HAIP, that is G7 Hiroshima AI process, and uses an LLM vulnerability scanner, that is multi-agent security module, that covers thousands of known weaknesses to keep models safe and threats as they evolve. And why this is important? Because trust it degrades without ongoing assurance. Then last but not the least is causality, cause and effect, why and what's next. So basically, we have a causal AI module that finds cravers and proposes no regret actions. It can inject prior knowledge for reliability when data is limited. And it's very important. Why are we doing this? They need more than what then why this is happening and why. So none of this is a bullet. Together, they produce you can prove, governance evidence, explanation you can read, sources you can cite, systems you can secure and monitor.
Mhm.
That's what I would like to say, Carlos. Back
Okay.
to you.
Well, thank you, Addy. So that was a great deep dive into the techniques. Chris, from your research, does this approach align with what enterprises are asking for today?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I take from Aditya's comments was that this is really, there is no silver bullet. And that's another way of saying that this is a very multidimensional problem. In other words, there's many aspects to what it means to be trustworthy. It's not just accuracy or reliability, it's explainability, transparency, and so on and so forth. And it's also, I think we should not neglect the fact that it's not simply a technology either. It's the larger system that is trustworthy. It's a process as much as it's a tool. It means accountability, controls, governance. And in fact, I think it's really interesting. A year ago or so, we would have talked about responsible AI in sessions like this. Now we start to talk much more about controls, and usually controls about things like good data and data management, controls about how well built and tested and monitored the models are, controls over guardrails, and increasingly with multiple agents, working on our models. And it also means extensive end user training. I think it's very easy to, if we ask stupid questions, we'll get stupid answers. And sometimes I think, it means the need for humans in the loop for control. And also perhaps something we haven't talked much about, but I think is really important moving forward, especially for these high risk projects, is accountability. We need a throat to choke in many of these situations. That AI, we can't fire an AI, we can't fire an agent. We need to have a human being who's got real skin in the game to make sure that, things get done the way they should be done.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, Chris. Well, accountability is definitely a very interesting, very important point. All right. So we've talked strategy. Now let's see it in action. So Aditya, can you share a quick example for us of how Fujitsu brings these principles to life?
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for bringing up the slide. So, as I was talking about 5 different pillars leading to trust already, let me focus on 2 of them. First one is trust. Trust starts with 2 visible behavior, fair decisions. On the top, you will see Fujitsu AI ethics for fairness, our way to measure and mitigate bias across data models and outcomes. And on the bottom, you will see safe use of LLM, our pattern for ground governed assistants. So what do we do? 2 things. First, fairness. We run intersectional fairness mitigation and keep the artifact so that you will need it for approvals. And the result, fairness deltas, you can show the business. And then the second one is grounded LLM. We anchor answers with knowledge graph and RAG inside Kojuchi RAI platform, that is reducing hallucination and attaching citations provenance to each response in a secure enterprise context. Again, why this matters? This turns trust from a promise and ops trail. For resilience, we pair it with continuous security testing and LLM vulnerability scanner and HAIP style transparency. So models, they stay robust as it's evolve. Then the second one is risk, because trust also means we can predict and document risk before we go live. So this is the Fujitsu AI Ethics Impact Assessment, one of the packages that you saw on ACOS Hub. It maps stakeholders and usages, scans for known ethical risk, and compiles an audit-ready risk table. So what is the input? Basically, you have your product context, data flows, roles, intended use, and then the engine is our assessment tool that leverages an incident knowledge base, European EU aligned ethics guidance to flag risk, example, bias, explainability gaps, oversight needs, those mitigations. So the output is basically a structured risk register with ownership, with mitigations and validation gates, ready to attach to your governance back. So why are we doing this? Why does this matter? By doing this, you reduce unknowns, shorten approval cycles, and create traceability from risk to mitigation to evidence. Deployed with partners like ACOS Hub, this maps directly to EU AI Act, ISO 42001, NIST AI Risk Management Framework, RMF, those kind of reporting. So risk, fairness, and governance line up in one place. So AI trust equals managing ethical, safety, and privacy and security risk with measurable AI quality. So rely on every decision. So that's how we do, Carlos. Today we covered trust and risk. Next episode, I think the upcoming episode, we'll dive into AI security pillar, threat testing, and controls to keep your AI safe in the real world. So that's
Mhm.
what I have to say, Carlos, for today. Back to you.
All right. Well, all right. Well, thank you very much, Addy. So those are some really great insights. So before we wrap up, let's have a little fun with our rapid fire true or false segment. Well, the objective here is to try to bust some myths around trustworthy AI. So I'll read a statement, and each of you just say true or false. And if you want, in the end, you can just add one sentence just to explain. Ready? All right. Here we go. Trustworthy AI is only about accuracy.
Definitely.
False.
Oh. Explainability is optional if your AI is highly accurate.
Largely false.
False. I think explainability is important.
Okay. Governance should start after deployment.
False.
Oh, absolutely false.
No.
All right. Generative AI is always more trustworthy than predictive AI.
False.
No. Wow.
We
Yeah.
don't trust you, Carlos. That's the problem. You're
Oh.
not trustworthy.
Goodness.
These lines are not true.
Yeah. So there's a single technology that guarantees trustworthiness.
False.
False.
All right. All right. Great answer. So that was fun, and it shows how many misconceptions there are out there. All right. So now, before we close, let's recap the big takeaways. And here's a 3-point playbook to building trustworthy AI. 1, define trustworthiness beyond precision. Focus on credibility and explainability. 2, embed governance and provenance from day one. And 3, use advanced techniques like knowledge graph plus RAG and multimodal AI for context-aware decisions. And remember, there is no silver bullet. Trust is earned through process and transparency. So once again, I want to thank our incredible speakers and everyone who joined us live today. This conversation is essential as AI moves deeper into business-critical decisions, and trust will definitely define your success. So if you'd like to dive deeper into this topic, simply scan the QR code on screen now, or use the link we'll also drop below. There you'll find demos, insight papers, and ways to connect with our team. You can also subscribe to our series to get notified for upcoming episodes. Our broadcast will end shortly, but we will be here for the next 20 minutes to answer all of your questions. So please drop them below in the comments section. And join us next time for episode 3, AI orchestration, humans and digital coworkers in action. All right, everyone. Thank you very much, and I'll see you there.
Thank you.
Thank you.